So good afternoon. Welcome. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Chris. Thanks for hosting us on your private dock, on your private lake.
Here we are, yes, Calhoun Lake number 2. That's right. It's a real name, in case you're not from the east side. We're at Calhoun Lake number 2 on our back dock, and we're talking about the upcoming concert.
Yeah.
So does it feel good to be getting back into the swing of things here?
Definitely. You know, I'll tell you a little story here. So our last performance here pre-COVID was the Bela Fleck night where he played his Juno Concerto and we played Appalachian Spring. And then a few weeks later, we did our Link Up Education concert. And that was it. And for me, the last concert that I conducted with an orchestra was March 7th. And the following months were just kind of like, oh dear, what's going to happen? You know, the uncertainty, not knowing when we're going to be able to get back on stage. And my mind started going all sorts of places. I developed a pandemic hobby of sourdough bread, got really into that. And
okay, you're one of those pandemic sourdough people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard about you.
Yes, I even bought a grain mill to make my own flour.
Wow.
And
where does one go to get a grain mill?
The internet.
Okay.
It's this fascinating
Stupid question.
Where,
Right.
So anyway, you know, I started thinking like, all right, well, you know, I don't know when the next time I'm going to be able to make music with our orchestra is going to be, and started to just kind of, you know, think about all sorts of other things besides music. And then we had our Ludwig concert that we recorded in September, mid-September. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was very validating, very reassuring in the time of all the uncertainty around performing and all that stuff, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what our orchestra is supposed to be doing. So I can't wait to get back on stage and make music with them.
And this is something actually that just struck me, is that, you know, I'm a flutist, so when I want to make music, my instrument is right up in my little music room, and I can just go and start practicing whenever I want to. And so when I kind of have that Jones, I can do it. And I've been practicing as much as usual. I'm reasonably in shape. But for a conductor, yeah, we kind of are your instrument in a way, aren't you? And aren't we? And so it must be kind of strange to be without your instrument.
Yes.
You're conceiving of the music, but you don't have the chance to make it.
I've missed it tremendously, and you're absolutely right. You know, conducting is not something that you can practice in a room. It's not something that you can do by yourself. You can only do it with other people. And that's been, you know, one of the great challenges is getting people together in this time, whether it's an orchestra, I mean, your family, a Super Bowl party, you know. I mean, it's just hard. There's risk inherent with getting people together. And, you know, I'll say this too about our organization. We've done a fantastic job of keeping people safe on stage. As you've probably noticed, you know, we've amended programs to shorten their length, to shorten the size of the orchestra, to not include all the winds and brass that we normally would, because obviously the aerosols that come out of the wind instruments can be dangerous. And it's just been this rethinking of our season, and we're very appreciative to the audience for being patient with us and going along with everything. What's most important is that we get music to the music lovers in this community and beyond. So yes, I really can't wait for this program to take place in a few days.
I bet so.
Yeah.
So do you find that do you become sort of hard to live with when you can't make music? Because I get a little bit cranky, if I'm going several days.
I haven't noticed anything.
Okay. should we check with Keela? I bet we should double check with her, shouldn't we? Okay.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, a corona coaster, as some people call this time of emotions. And the beginning of the pandemic, when everything locked down, and all of a sudden, we're faced with the reality of not being able to do what we normally do. I typically travel a lot, and I really enjoy it. Not being able to do that, and then, of course, the music making. It's like one thing this time has taught me, and I think a lot of us, is we don't take things for granted as much. It really is a gift to be able to do what we love to do, which is make music and share that with people. Yeah. It's a real blessing. And I think that's going to inform everything our organizations do in the future. How can we keep this I guess, the specialness about what we're doing alive and not slip back into just the old, all right, we got to do another concert. Let's make everything count.
The routine that can take over sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess it takes a pandemic to, kind of put that in everybody's face.
Yeah, right, to make us realize we had all along.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
let's talk a little bit about this concert.
Yeah.
You had a kind of idea and a theme behind this concert a year ago when it first got programmed. Yeah. And circumstances have forced you to alter the program. Right. So talk about what that idea was and how you've gone about staying true to the idea while having to adjust the repertoire.
Right. So this program was intended to be performed live for an in-person audience on February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. So we had a romantic theme in mind. Originally, the program was going to include the Mozart Piano Concerto No. 21, also known as the Elvira Madigan, with that beautiful second slow movement, and some of the repertoire that is still on the program. But when we realized that we needed to make some changes, we thought, well, what changes do we want to make? What can we do that's going to be impactful and deliver some good music with, keeping things flexible and within our budget and all the things that we have to consider as a nonprofit organization. So we thought, well, let's forego the piano concerto for now. Let's keep this concert just all strings. And the Tchaikovsky Serenade was already going to be on the program. The Mahler was already going to be on the program. But the first three pieces weren't necessarily going to be on the program. The first three pieces are Jesse Montgomery's Starburst, Florence Price's second movement from a string quartet in G major, and then the Meditation from Thais by Jules Massenet, this moment from his grand opera, which is just a violin solo accompanied by the orchestra. And the first two pieces are very much linked in that their composers are both African-American women. One, Jessie Montgomery, very much alive and thriving today. Her music is getting played by almost every orchestra right now. And it's really, really good music. I think the piece Starburst is going to get played for a long, long time. It's a really fun, especially as a concert opener, just a very energetic, fun piece of music. And then Florence Price was the first African-American female composer to have her music played by a major orchestra. And her music, as noted in your fabulous program notes, was sort of lost for a long time. And it wasn't until, maybe 10 years ago, 2009, that somebody found all this music in a box in a house that was, in disrepair. And that's how her music sort of started to get played. So those first two pieces are very much linked. And I'd like to think that, we wouldn't have a Jessie Montgomery if we didn't have a Florence Price before.
And it's exciting for me as a music lover to find out that, I've been at this game for a long time. And to find out that there's so much music out there that I don't know yet. Yeah. Stuff that just never kind of made it into the hit parade. Right. And as a result, you can work as a professional musician for a long time and just not encounter it. Right. And I certainly would hope that Jessie Montgomery is going to have a different fate than Florence Price did. But, Florence Price, I gather, discovered a sort of champion in Frederick Stock, the conductor of the Chicago Symphony, But when he lost that job, in part owing to strained relations between Americans and Germans, he was a German, in the mid-30s, she kind of lost her champion.
Right.
And as a result, she never had the opportunity really to enter into the canon, as it were, to enter into those kind of the greatest hits.
Yeah, and it's really, really nice music that she wrote. You know, I mean, her symphonies we're going to see them getting played more for sure. But it has this, you know, this Americana-ness about it. It reminds me of the music of like early American romantic composers like Converse,
Sure.
Charles Thomason Griffiths, you know, this sort of, you know, obviously European influenced from the, you know, harmonic and melodic and just the orchestration and all that kind of stuff. But the music itself, the themes, all that kind of stuff has this sort of American folk vibe to it that is just very, very pleasant. When I hear her music, I think of Dvorak, as you noted, you know, and his use of folk music, whether it be Czech or American. And yeah, I think the audience is really going to enjoy this beautiful andante movement from her string quartet.
And certainly that Jessie Montgomery piece is an exciting piece and very accessible. That's one that any audience is going to love.
Absolutely.
Right from the get-go.
Yeah, right from the get-go. It's very energetic, very, very rhythmic. The pulse, once it starts, it doesn't stop. It's in one tempo all the way through, and it just kind of flies around. There's a really cool moment when you watch the concert. You might be able to see the double bass section has this huge glissando that they do, and you just see them cover almost the entire, you know, neck of the of the instrument, and a lot of fun harmonics, some really cool effects in it. But it's just exciting music, you know, and it's about 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes long. It's not the easiest thing in the world to play, so we'll spend some time in rehearsal putting it together because it's a little tricky, but certainly worth delving into.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And you've got a remarkable soloist for the Meditation from Thais, haven't you?
That's
Who's
right.
that? Tell us about that person.
Well, you know, the Philharmonic started its own youth orchestra program last season, and it was very, very successful, and it's kept going even in the COVID times. They've done a fantastic job of keeping the musical opportunities going for the youngsters. And the soloist that we have invited to play with us is the concertmaster of our youth orchestra. Hayden Green is his name. And he's a fabulous young violinist. He's a senior in high school, so I think he's probably getting ready to think about college. If he hasn't already, he probably knows where he's going to go. I mean, he's a very, you know, smart, bright, talented young man. And this will be the first time that we feature somebody from the newly founded youth orchestra as a soloist with the Philharmonic on one of our Zimmerli series performances. And, you know, just think about where that youth orchestra, what the students from that youth orchestra are going to be doing 5, 10, 20 years from now. Yeah. So this will be the first of many features of a youth orchestra student. And he's playing one of the most beautiful things written for the violin, the Meditation from Jules Massenet's opera Thais. It's just gorgeous. People have probably heard it before, even though they don't know what it is.
Yeah, right. And it's a piece that gets played a lot as an encore in violin recitals, violins. Yeah, and the opera itself is not actually very well known, but that particular little bonbon, like you say, has gotten plucked out.
Right.
And
it's one of those pieces too that not just violinists play.
True.
A lot of instruments have borrowed it because it's such a great thing.
You can play it in the flute. I've got it right up in my music room and was practicing it yesterday. Had not thought of that, but I suppose why not?
Yeah.
Tuba's got the range.
Yeah.
Now, there are a couple of pieces on the program that you'd planned to have on the program right from the get-go. You've got some Mahler and you've got some Tchaikovsky. So talk about your relationship with that Mahler.
Well, most every orchestral musician has a deep relationship with Mahler's music because it is almost the ultimate in orchestral expression. As you know, he wrote 9 completed symphonies. He started a 10th but didn't finish it, although several people have finished it. So I guess you can say he wrote 10 symphonies. And each one is at least an hour long. Each one has at least 4 movements. And they are long involved. As Mahler said about his music, he said, in my music is the entire world. And what he was trying to do with the symphony was to have this vehicle for expression that deals with the human experience, the ups, the downs, everything that we as human beings are confronted with in this life. All of that is in his music. And the piece that we are playing, the slow movement from his Fifth Symphony, the Adagietto movement, was written as a love letter to his soon-to-be wife, Alma Schindler, who became Alma Mahler. And it's pretty interesting. He wrote it in manuscript form and then just gave it to her. No note attached, no explanation, just gave it to her. She was a very accomplished musician as well, so she was able to sit there and play it at the piano, and she knew exactly what the message was in this music. It is most tender, absolutely just imbued with this sense of romantic love. It's unmistakable what this music is trying to convey.
Yeah, and the orchestration in particular, because one of the things that does stand out about this movement to me in Mahler's, in that symphonic repertoire of Mahler, is that, you're so used to having 110, 120, 140 people on stage, and the full absolute range of sonic palette that Mahler has, and yet for this love letter, he dials it down and dials it back to just the strings and the harp.
Exactly. And, there's great debate, too, about the Adagietto, and that is the tempo.
Yes.
So, conductors of the 20th century, in particular, the conductor that brought us Mahler, it's really important to note that Mahler's music did not enjoy a whole lot of success in his lifetime, and thereafter, until Leonard Bernstein started to champion it. And there are these fabulous videos, actually, that you can watch on YouTube of him rehearsing Mahler symphonies with the Vienna Symphony, not the Philharmonic, the symphony, and they don't know it. Like, he's teaching them Mahler, and he's sweating and smoking, and it's like, it's like this iconic moment. Like, if you want to know what Leonard Bernstein was all about, watch these videos, because it's so incredible. So Bernstein, who was the Mahler champion and sort of the revivalist of his music, was known for his broad tempos, if you will. Mm-hmm. And he certainly broadened the Adagietto to a point where a lot of people started to make the argument. It's like, if you think about Mahler and a lot of his compositions having to do with song and lieder, art song, if one were to think of the Adagietto as a song of Mahler, in other words, these melodies, these phrases would have to be able to be sung by the human voice and one breath's worth of, wind power.
Right, to get to the end of the phrase.
Exactly, to get to
sure.
the end of the phrase. And if you play it so slow, you're not going to be able to have that, I guess, human voice quality and the song-like quality of it. So for me, it's a balancing act, because I love the slow tempos, I love Bernstein, and I love his interpretations of Mahler. But also, I appreciate the simple elegance in a slightly brighter tempo, so that the music can really flow a bit better. Mm-hmm. So, I guess I'm in the middle. Uh-huh. I'm in the middle. Which, actually that's a pretty decent segue to something that you brought up earlier about playing a piece of music in the orchestra versus conducting it.
Right, yeah. So this is something that I had been wondering about, that if you all, and many of you quite reasonably, don't know a lot of brass players are dialed in for Mahler. Brass players get really wired up and excited to play Mahler, and so Stefan, being a brass player, would have been really, really excited about playing all of these symphonies. But this is the one movement where you guys were just back there kind of hanging out, waiting for the strings to do their thing. And so I was wondering about what's the experience like when you're conducting a piece that you haven't played in the orchestra versus conducting a piece that you've played many times in an orchestra. Because I'm sure that there are things that are lost and gained both ways. So as you're coming to a piece that's in the midst of a super familiar symphony, but one where you yourself haven't actually been the one making the sounds in that moment, what's that like for you?
Well, playing in the orchestra is, each time you play a piece of music, you are sort of redefining your interpretation of that through your colleagues' work and the conductor's work. And most of the time, it's a very pleasant experience, and that performance or series of performances then becomes sort of how you feel about it. You know, it colors your interpretation of the music. But something like this, like the Adagietto from Mahler 5, where, you know, the trombone section would, in rehearsal, maybe get up and walk off stage, or, you know, pull out their magazine or get on their phone or something like that. I was always the type of brass musician that didn't do those things.
I bet so. No, I believe you on that, actually, that you were the one probably watching Joanne Folletta and going, what's she doing with her?
And I would bring my score to, like, you know, really see it and see what the conductor's doing, because even playing in the orchestra, I had these, you know, inklings of conducting and wanted to, you know, maybe someday do it. So one of the best ways to learn how to conduct is watch people conduct. Sure. You see what doesn't work, you see what works, and you start to, you know, refine your, I guess, you know, dictionary of gestures and all that kind of stuff. And then you start to get opportunities to get on the podium and conduct ensembles, and you start to develop your own unique lexicon of gestures that sort of define you as a conductor.
And you're coming to it in a way as a fully formed and matured adult.
Right.
Versus a lot of the things, you know, that we grew up playing in youth orchestras, for instance, we kind of were learning by rote as 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds.
Right.
And so you're probably approaching it with a certain amount of baggage as well as the experience.
Right.
Whereas you're coming to something like this, or even more the Tchaikovsky piece that is on this program too, with not so much experience, but also with no baggage.
Right.
That you're seeing it through the fresh and mature eyes of your current self.
I have never played the Tchaikovsky String Serenade.
Right, I bet so.
But I've conducted a number of times, and to me, it's like the small symphony that he wrote. You know, it's got the 4 movements. You know, the first movement has an introduction and then a sonata allegro form. Then you've got the beautiful iconic Tchaikovsky waltz, and then you've got the slow movement that sort of plays with this. To me, there are moments of, like, it almost has this sacred sound to it, almost like a Russian Orthodox type of sound to it. But then, you know, the master melody writer, once the tune starts, you know, that Tchaikovsky was. And then the last movement is like, you know, the finale, the typical Tchaikovsky finale, where if they played any faster, their instruments might just combust, you know. Fabulous piece. It's definitely a piece the orchestra is familiar with. It's hard to not have played the Tchaikovsky String Serenade as a professional musician. I mean, you're going to see that at some point in your, you know, development and professional career. So it's something that people are going to be familiar with in the ensemble, and we can really have a lot of fun shaping the music and, you know, earning style points, if you will, with a little rubato here and a little rubato there. And it's great Tchaikovsky.
And one of the things that I know has interested us both about this piece is that it was written right around the same time as the 1812 Overture. Right. Speaking of familiar music, and yet the 1812 wasn't the one that Tchaikovsky liked. It was this, the one that got him excited, that he loved.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that kind of stuff. You know, like 1812 Overture. It's a part of pop culture, right? And the composer didn't feel so great about it, you know. But then, you know, the pieces that they were truly inspired by, like, you know, there wasn't necessarily a commission for them to write, like the last 3 symphonies of Mozart, you know, that, you know, and he was a composer that, you know, worked on commission a lot. But those last 3 symphonies, there was no deadline, no check coming, you know, in the mail. He just felt the need to do this. And you always ask, well, why? Yeah. You know, I mean, why are you going to write 3 masterpieces and spend all that time doing it without the promise of them getting performed or getting any, you know, compensation for it? So, you know, I guess there is something to be said for, you know, the altruistic nature of an artist and just doing it because they feel compelled to do it.
Which is something that we get to see in this Tchaikovsky Serenade. Like, I sometimes feel myself that Tchaikovsky's at his best when he hasn't got brass to fall back on, when he's got the more limited color palette of the strings. And and this is a fantastic and beautiful piece. And like you say, it's a piece that is born out of his own passion and desire for self-expression, which is probably why it fits in so great with a Valentine's season program, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree. It works. It's very romantic music, and the waltz in particular and the slow movement are, you could almost extract them and put them on a program of romantic movements like the Adagietto or the Meditation from Thais. Here's the slow movement from the Tchaikovsky String Serenade, or
But and you have here a program then where you have romantic in the sort of narrow sense of this is a love song, this is something having to do with with romantic love between two people, but you also have something that is really about self-expression, in that romantic with a capital R, push towards pure self-expression, divorced from commerce, divorced from any sort of external pressure, but just absolute human self-expression. And you've got some of that going in this program too.
We do.
So despite all of the changes, you still ended up with something that worked.
Yeah. Well, we have, as you know, we have a fabulous team that makes so much happen for this organization. And, this time has brought us together. We've had to strategize about what we're going to do. There was a period early on in the pandemic when the team met daily, Monday through Friday, on Zoom. And we've sort of resumed that now.
Resumed? Ha, good one, yeah.
Yeah. We've resumed that now. And it's really good. Communication is key, right? Yeah. So it's been a lot of great work by this team to make sure that music keeps coming. And hopefully, things are looking brighter and brighter with the vaccines rolling out. I can't wait to get vaccinated.
That's right.
And hopefully, we'll be in a position soon that we can do what we normally do, which is get people together to enjoy this great music.
And as we look forward to next season, especially, like you said when we started talking here today, all of these things that we took for granted for so many years, we can no longer take for granted. But to have them opening up again in the fall, that first full orchestra concert in Twitchell, that's going to be so exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Think of how exciting to be there up in the balcony.
Yeah.
When those final chords happen.
Right.
And we're all back together again.
Can't wait.
Yep, me neither.
Can't wait.
And I'm looking forward to this program, too. So thank you for coming, joining me here on The Dock.
Thank you, Chris.
And for telling us about this program.
Always a pleasure speaking with you.
And likewise, thank you.